Friday night, time for the next episode of the Echoes of Fear podcast. I am Jason Hewlett,
And I am Kenton J. Moore.
and we're actually doing this episode in two separate locations. Usually we record in studio together, but Kenton's been on the road, so the next two episodes, this one and the one that follows, we're doing via Zoom. So please forgive any audio faux pas, barking dogs, throwing up children, or anything like that that might arise during the next 30 odd minutes or so.
The wonders of technology, hey?
Exactly. To think that 10 years ago, we couldn't have done this remotely. Like,
No.
no,
It's
it's just
amazing. It
wild.
really is. It's amazing.
So, what are we talking about for the next 2 weeks, Kenton?
All right. So the topic of today and next week, we're going to be talking about the fear of cryptid creatures, which is actually a little interesting from the phobia side of things because cryptozoophobia, which is the full name, or cryptophobia, is the named fear of cryptid monsters, but it's often confused and very overlapping with another phobia known as terraphobia, which is the fear of monsters. So that's, kraken and unicorns,
People are
all
scared of
sorts of.
unicorns? Like,
Yeah, well, I don't know about you, man, but after watching Shazam Fury of the Gods, I was like, that's a terrifying idea for a unicorn.
my wife's a
Except the
unicorn
whole,
fan, so she has like the fuzzy, funny, cute unicorns, like stuffies and dolls all over the place. So I find it hard to believe people could be scared of it. But I guess, yeah, if you've got a mythical beast that's anything but fuzzy, warm and fuzzy looking, that'd be kind of scary.
right, exactly. And that's just it. I mean, Deadpool definitely isn't afraid of unicorns.
Nope.
But yeah, no, it was the reason I bring those two phobias up, the terraphobia and cryptozoophobia, is because while I was doing all the research on all of it for this episode, it was there's so much overlap between the two, hey? And whenever you get into these things where you have these what the DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic Manual of Statistic Mental Health Disorders, when you get into these types of phobias, they're referred to as a specific phobia, so they don't really have them documented by that actual name. And when you get overlap such as terraphobia and cryptozoophobia, you tend to find statistics and information that sort of muddies the water between one or the other. So on this one, Jason, you might be interested to know, I decided to take a bit of a different angle on it. And when I was trying to figure out how many people actually suffer from this phobia, I decided to look at how many people actually believe in cryptid monsters. Want to
That's a
take
good
a
way to
stab
approach
at?
it, I think, right? Because it's not as cryptids are kind of like a fringe thing. I think they're becoming more prevalent due to shows like, like Expedition Bigfoot and Finding Bigfoot and the Small Town Monsters documentaries, but they aren't like a fear of the dark or fear of clowns like we've already touched on, or ghosts even.
Exactly. Yeah. And like, what do you think? Like, just spitball here. What do you think the number is? How many people in the population of North America, percentage wise, do you think might believe in cryptid monsters?
Oh man, that's tough because I work within that fringe group, so most people I talk to do, right? So, but I would say like a 38% maybe.
Yeah, that's actually very close. Yeah, it's actually a little over 20%.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just like 20.6 or something percent of people in North America, but it, as you mentioned, it is growing, right?
Yeah, I think it's just, yeah, as pop culture, which obviously we'll talk about in the second half,
Yeah.
plays into it. That's interesting though. So less than a quarter of the population of North America believes that these cryptid creatures could exist.
Yeah. And specifically, whenever you look at it, they are always, almost always talking about Bigfoot. You know what I mean? Like he is the most famous cryptid that's out there regionally. Regionally, we get all these independent cryptids, like, you and I in our local area. Our big famous one is the Ogopogo out
Yep,
of Lake Okanagan in Kelowna, which you're very familiar with.
I am having written a book and been a part of a documentary project about it.
Yeah, fascinating book, by the way. You had a very interesting angle to look at it, maybe we could get into that in part two
Sure,
when we're
absolutely.
talking pop culture, because I'd like to talk a little bit more about your angle on the Ogopogo. But regionally speaking, what's really cool about the cryptids, what I was saying to you before we hit record this morning, is this one, out of all the phobias you've sent me down the whole of researching, this phobia has really lit a fire in, in my belly, in terms of like, I want to go out and look for some of these things.
It
I
does
want to
that,
hunt
man.
them.
It does. Once you sort of get you sort of taste the flesh of cryptozoology, you just want more.
Yeah, and it was especially getting into what we have in British Columbia, like what's around us. And right now, like Jason mentioned, I'm out on the road, so I'm actually recording this episode from Vancouver Island, which has a significant amount of lore and history. Victoria, British Columbia is often considered the most legitimately haunted city in North America.
Yep.
There's so much lore, legend and lore here. And I've been looking at some really interesting cryptid things in this area, like the Dundas Island black flies, which is an island off the coast of I believe it's Port Renfrew. I don't have it in front of me here, so I might be messing it up. But this Dundas Island is it's known as, nobody goes on it. There's not a single large animal that lives on that island because the black flies are just so bad. And there's this legend of these Dundas Island black flies that are like 2 to 3 centimeters long, just giant black flies. And, it just gives me the creeps. And I liked it because it's the first cryptid I've ever heard of that was an insect.
That is too. That's a new one to me, actually. But
Yeah.
you know what I mean? I mean,
So,
black flies are real, obviously. Like that, we've all dealt with them, but to have, cryptids that's like 2 to 3 centimeters long, that's interesting. That's really interesting.
yeah. Right. And so when you think of like people that suffer a phobia, and you think specifically of cryptids, what might happen to a person that has these fears? Well, if you have that, if you're afraid to go out in the woods, you won't go camping, or you won't stay in a dark forest overnight because of fears of things like Bigfoot and other kind of monsters that slink in the darkness, then it's highly likely that you actually have terraphobia or cryptozoophobia, because those are the most common factors. They're people that are unable to stay alone overnight outside, and they have this unsettling urge to run, like they're being hunted or watched or chased away.
Like fight or flight, total fight or flight
Yeah,
syndrome. More on the flight than the fight, obviously. Because
yeah,
how would you fight this giant, 8 foot tall ape-like creature, or, this emaciated, like thing with like a deer horn head, and that kind of stuff? You just want to run.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And so as a specific phobias themselves occur in like 7.4% of people. So if you start doing the math on these kind of things, and you look at 20% of people believe that cryptids are real, 7.4% of people suffer from specific phobias, then it's highly likely that 5 to 10% of people would suffer from cryptozoophobia, which, again, like we already mentioned in nyctophobia episodes, in our first and second episodes, it could be that fear of monsters at night, right?
Hmm. Lurking in the dark. It's what's in the dark that's frightening as opposed to the dark itself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's been quite the road to go down. And I got to tell you, like I've found my favorites. I'm
Okay.
not gonna
Okay.
lie. I'm not gonna lie. I found my favorites in terms of like the learning about cryptids and the fears and all these kind of things. And I can't. I bought, I think, 3 books online about the Wahila, which is the dire wolf from the
Okay. Yeah.
Nahanni Valley, the Headless Valley up
Yep.
in. So if people aren't aware of that one, look it up. It's absolutely amazing. I'm fascinated with it. Um, and it's the Nahanni National Park. It has this place called the Headless Valley, where all these miners and explorers and everything disappeared. Uh, and it borders Northwest Territories in the Yukon, and they believe that there's this dire wolf, this enormous bear slash wolf creature that lives up there that, it seems to be not an aggressive predator, but sort of like a scavenger type creature. And it likes to bite the heads off of people.
That's
Yeah,
awesome
it's,
in a horrible way.
yeah, in a super horrible way. And again, it just ties right into that, like the, I find that the fear of cryptids is very, very, very enshrined within that fear of open wilderness,
That makes
like
sense, right?
mountain lands and
Yeah.
valleys and forests. Hey.
Well, you got to think because okay. So first, you're dealing with an animal that hasn't been identified on the zoological chart, so it's already kind of mysterious and frightening that ways. And then usually these encounters do happen in remote places like the woods, where you're alone, or it's like two or three of you or five of you, whatever you've got in your group, but that's it. So there's no quick escape and help's
Mm-hmm.
not coming. You know what I mean? Like it's because generally when you
Right.
and I spend a lot of time in the woods, a lot of times you don't even have cell service anymore. Even with all our modern technology, you're unless you got a sat phone, you're kind of screwed.
And it's funny because this got me thinking when I started down this rabbit hole. It really got me thinking, how much of the planet Earth do humans actually cover? And like we are so, I don't want to what the word is, but like there's so much hubris in human society where we believe that we understand everything,
Mhm.
on a a sociological scale. The majority of people think that they understand their entire world. But when I started thinking about things like, I started reading about the Nahani Valley and I start looking at all these things, and Bigfoot even, and my own backyard, I've had friends who've had Bigfoot encounters, and I laugh at it, or I used to. I'd laugh at it and I'd think, right, like what? I mean, how many people are out there logging every day? Do you know how many people are riding back roads? But then I realized, like, actually, how many are? We're talking about one or two people who might go down a Forest Service road on any given weekend, and that's 5-6 minutes of passing through an area.
And
So
that's it.
yeah,
That is
like
literally
these
it. So
these
6 minutes out of a week. I don't know what I'm not great at math, so, but think of how many minutes that is when there's nobody there.
right, so how
Yeah.
many of these biomes, especially here in Canada, remain completely untouched by humans? Like,
Tons, man. Like Canada's a great example of that because our population is like what, maybe 20 million for all of
yeah.
Canada. And we've got like what the second largest land mass that's part of this country. So that leaves a lot of untouched, unexplored wilderness, right? Like that's a boatload of places for something to hide.
Oh, for sure.
Not even hide,
And
it just lives there and no one's going to cross its path.
that's exactly the point I was going to make. Is there I don't even think they're hiding, because they've got enough land and area to avoid us. And like humans don't realize just how bloody loud they are,
And
and here's an
smelly they
example.
are,
Yeah, and smelly. Yeah, perfect example. Like, so I come from a family of hunters and outdoorsmen. I'm going to say that now. My grandfather, my uncles, my cousins, my best friends, everybody I know were either loggers, truck drivers. Most of them, all of them, hunted or still hunt. So we're talking about a long line of people who spend all their time in the bush in those areas. And I'm no different. I hunted too. I don't necessarily enjoy killing things. Now I like to hunt with a camera more than a rifle, but
Yeah. And when you hunted for food.
yeah. But
Yeah.
one of my favorite stories and I'm going to tell a bit of a hunting story here just to give an example about the wilderness. I was on a 10-day hunting trip with my best friend, my dad, and another Navy veteran friend of mine. And we were way, way up north of like Prince George. We were in this tiny, tiny little town called Manson Creek, where there's only like, I think 23 or 24 people. The only building that has power is the general store, and they have solar panels because there's no power running in there. It's just untouched wilderness north of Mackenzie up there. And we were camping on this place called Skunk Lake. And at 7 o'clock in the morning, I got up one morning and I got my stepdad to drop me off in this big open land clearing. And I was leaning against a stump, just, waiting to see if a moose or something would come in. And about 10 o'clock in the morning, this fog rolled in and I couldn't see 15 feet past my face, my face, right? And I'm laying there and all of a sudden I hear this whoosh, 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 whoosh sound, and it scared me. I didn't know what it was. And the fog, if I looked up, I could see the sky. I couldn't see in front of me, but it wasn't deep enough that I couldn't see the sky. And I look up and there's this crow flying probably maybe 80 feet above my head, and I could hear its wing beats that loud,
Because there's no other noise,
because
right? There's no other noise to take that sound away from you, to
nothing,
drown it out.
nothing whatsoever. And then I juxtapose that with my house, like right beside Highway 5. And I've mentioned before that, my backyard goes into wilderness and just wild forest. And my friends have had Bigfoot encounters back there. We camped at that waterfall and all that. But when you're sitting at my house, all you hear all day long is highway noise and the train track. And
Mhm.
it because of the valley, it just echoes. So you think these creatures have had that are out there, they over time they would evolve to just know where that noise is, and they can find those quiet places because those quiet places still exist.
Big time. And I know when people who have gone looking for Bigfoot, it's one of those cases where, like, if you're going out actively searching for it, like which people go on expeditions, and by the time this episode comes out, I believe I'll have done one myself for a documentary. You go, you're looking like you're actively hunting, but the most success you will ever have is if you just go set up camp and stay there and just go about your
Yeah,
daily business because you're being quiet, you're just doing regular stuff, and they will come and just check you out, and that's your greatest chance of actually ever seeing one, kind of
yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah,
And I've
for
been in the
sure.
woods a lot where, I mean, if there was a Sasquatch, it could have been like, 5 feet from me and I would never have known because I'm just not looking for, you know what I mean? And they're very quiet and they're just waiting. Like, but when you feel like something's watching, like you're going about yourself, you just get a sensation of being viewed. I've
Yeah,
had that a lot of times in the woods. I mean, it could be a squirrel, but it could also be a Sasquatch.
yeah, yeah.
That's how I look at it.
And that's the thing, like deer, for example, even just deer here on Vancouver Island, the black-tailed deer, which are the predominant species here, a lot of the people in the hunting community here call them ghosts because you'll never know they're here. The ground, the land here is so thick with vegetation.
Yeah.
And they're so well adapted to moving through it without making a sound. You could be on a hiking trail and a deer could pass you 5 feet off the trail and you'll never know unless, you smell them
Yeah,
or
of course,
something.
right? Of course.
Yeah.
I've
But
walked
it,
by bears and not even been aware until I just about passed it, and it kind of just would walk out on the trail behind me. So it would have been probably like, 2 feet to my right, and I just went by it, and then it just walked out behind me and just kind of continued up on its day, right? That's
yeah,
terrifying, and
yeah.
that's just a bear.
That's just a
If you
bear.
wanted to eat me, I'd
Yeah.
have been done.
You don't think about these other things and stuff and all that. And and it of course there's a phone call. Yeah, sorry about that, everybody. But
That's fine.
anyways, like what what's interesting about all of the cryptid stuff, and what really fascinated me was in my research I actually discovered a list. There's actually many lists out there, but this one specific list I found, I've read it through, I think about 12 times. And what it is it's 15 cryptids that were actually proved to exist.
Hmm.
So here's the thing about cryptids. When we talk about ghosts and the fear of ghosts, there's no way to really prove that ghosts are real except for dying, right? Like we
Yeah.
talked about in the phasmophobia episodes last week and stuff. But when you talk about these cryptids, well, there's cryptids out there that for years and years and years people thought of them as mythical monsters, but then science discovered them, cataloged them, and now we know they exist.
So what are some
So
examples of that, Kenton?
well, yeah. Sorry, I'm just I'm excited about this one. I really like this out. So the biggest, here's a couple examples here. The Komodo dragon
Yeah.
off the Indonesian islands, long considered a cryptid, tales of giant man-eating lizards. Wasn't discovered until the 1920s that its existence was confirmed. Right,
Yeah.
giant squid, colossal squid. They long thought of as the kraken, tentacled beasts that would drag sailors to their doom. you know, discovered
20,000 leagues
one
under the
wash.
sea.
Yeah, exact 20,000 leagues under the sea. 1800s first dead specimen washed up on a beach in Newfoundland, right? The okapi, strange elusive creature that was, thought to be a cross between a giraffe and a zebra, striped legs and a long dark tongue. And it was confirmed in the 1920s, but they're still extremely elusive, right?
Yeah.
And the coelacanth fish, those giant prehistoric armored fish that were thought long dead, and then in 1938 fishermen off the coast of South Africa caught them, right? There's so much, and I love it. That's just a few examples, but it gets me thinking like about this wahila. When you look about the wahila, you research about the wahila, and they talk about how it has these half bear half dog like features and all this kind of stuff. Of course, my son being interested in paleontology, I started looking down that road almost immediately, and I found out that Ivan Sanderson, who originally wrote a book, The Dire Wolf, he believes that this white northern wolf, this dire wolf, Gila creature, might be a living fossil called an amphicyon, which was a bone crushing canid, commonly referred to as a bear dog that lived in the Miocene epoch. Right. So
That would make sense. It'd make perfect sense.
yeah, and it gets you thinking when it comes to cryptids that, of course you would be afraid of them because of the legend and the elusiveness and the wild untamed land that you'd need to be in order to be exposed to them. So the phobia and the fear of them would be very real. But at the end of the day, I think what makes cryptids so fascinating and scary to me is how real they could possibly be.
I think so. I mean, it's interesting now because in the world of cryptozoology, you're having things like dogmen and the mothman and the wendigo lumped in
Mm-hmm.
alongside, like, like Bigfoot and Ogopogo and the Loch Ness Monster. But these things like, or Goatman even, like, and so, but
Yeah. Yeah.
Goatman, Mothman, the Wendigo, Dogmen are lean more supernatural to
Yeah.
me, and there's nothing, never been anything like them on the zoological charts or in like paleontology records. So I see them as like this different offshoot of things, right? I wanted to clarify that's my stance on it. I can't call a Wendigo a cryptid because it's actually more of a possession for a spirit kind of thing. But yeah, like Ogopogo is very much the descriptions, the actual descriptions. It's not a plesiosaur. It's something much more with a long serpentine body, the head of like a horse or a dragon, like little antlers, etc. And it looks more like an amphibian, like a prehistoric amphibian creature. The name of which it's in my book. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it's in there.
Yeah.
Ken Gerhardt actually refers to, I think, like an archaeosaur or something like that, or a
Yeah.
chronosaur, something more like that. So that's more, if it exists, it's more along those lines, and that's where I look at a cryptid being as something that is related to some sort of prehistoric creature, or from hundreds of years, millions of years ago, that could still potentially exist and just hasn't been seen. Much like the ones that you already discussed.
Yeah. Yeah. And Victoria has its own here too. They call it
Cadborosaurus.
Cadborosaurus,
Sorry,
right?
didn't mean to
Yeah.
steal your thunder.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Steal away. I've been talking all this episode. So
I love the Cadborosaurus even is described as looking very much like what Ogopogo looks like.
correct. Yeah. Yeah. With plesiosaurus almost type descriptions where the long snake-like neck and stuff like that, right? And
Yeah.
the fins. Yeah, Sealkey is another Vancouver Island cryptid that came across my list, and they talk about it being like almost a wolf type of seal, like a furrier, more large, aggressive type of seal that First Nations and stuff have sort of sought out and revered for many years.
Interesting.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
and
it's
there's a
it,
big Bigfoot population apparently on Vancouver Island as well. There's been many Bigfoot
correct.
sightings.
Yeah, yeah. They called them gorilla men or something. Like they're
Yeah.
not Bigfoot. They don't call them that, or Sasquatch. There's a different name for them. Don't know it
But
off the top of my head, but
there was an episode of Monster Quest that was all about the sightings on Vancouver Island. They actually coined the phrase Ape Island for Vancouver
That
Island, which has now
that's
been picked up in pop culture, like, even though it was just made
yeah.
up for Monster Quest.
Maybe that's what it was. It was Island Ape Men or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. And like the Nahani Valley legends, when you get into those too, they talk about a bunch of like that Bigfoot might not actually be a cryptid monster, but just be like wild, uncivilized populations of humans that
Yeah. Same
live
in
out in
Alaska.
the woods. And
Same in Alaska. I mean, every part of the world has like a wild man slash ape man story. So, so they're in Australia, they're in Russia, they're in China, they're all over the place. So there's something to
Florida,
this phenomenon. Yeah.
the Florida man are everywhere, right?
Florida man, skunk ape, like,
Yeah, but like going back to your comment about Wendigos and stuff, that's exactly what I meant when I was doing all this research, how much overflow there is. And I think it all comes down to the fact that so many cryptids are undefined. Like a lot of where we get the legends of cryptid monsters comes from is lore and folklore. And lore and folklore crosses both, what could be real and what likely isn't. But you get things where Wendigo comes up a lot as a cryptid monster, but like you mentioned, it's really not. It's more like a demonic curse, right?
yeah.
Loup Garou, which is the Quebecois version of werewolves, the Canadian version of werewolves, they come up a lot as cryptids, but that's again more of a supernatural curse. Vampirism and other things like that. Chupacabra, um, sky serpents, thunderbirds, all of these spirit creatures that have anthropomorphic descriptions tend to get lumped in with cryptids, even though I think a lot of people now are, with cryptozoology specifically, are really pushing to separate those two, right?
Yeah.
Into what could be legitimate and what could not be legitimate. There's actually a cryptozoological society here in British Columbia. I found them when I was doing my research, and I was like right at that point where I was like, I want to do this. I want to hunt these things. I want to try to find these things. But I got in there and I was looking at their website and what you need to do for membership, and there was a lot in there that was like, you have to understand that we are trying to be legitimate scientists here. We're trying to prove these creatures exist. We don't want crazy people coming in and being like, well, I'm gonna find a Wendigo or whatever,
I know
and
John Kirk. He and I worked on Cursed Waters together, and yeah, they're very scientific. And he doesn't like people like me who also are paranormal investigators, because he doesn't want to connect any of the spiritual stuff to it. Which I know you want to talk about this. This is probably more in the second episode, but also all of these creatures, like you pointed out, are part of folklore. Quite often, indigenous folklore, where there's a heavy spiritual component attached to it. These are more than just flesh and blood creatures, which I am starting to lean towards. That's my personal stance, that there's more to it than just straight up biology here. But
yeah,
that's my two
yeah.
bits. So
No, I
John Kirk and
always
I kind of butt heads that way, like when it comes to.
yeah.
I tried actually, as an aside, reaching out to him to be interviewed for my book, and they basically politely told me to f off.
Oh,
Like,
yeah. Yeah.
as I'm a
Yeah,
paranormal investigator too.
from what I read on their website, that's exactly it, like, and there, I would like, me, when I think about it, and I get the butterflies in my stomach, I think about, going out with night vision cameras and setting up trail cameras, camping in an area, looking over the drones footage, trying to track things by physical evidence like footprints and tree bark scratches,
Oh, and you have
Bigfoot.
to. You
Yeah,
have to approach it that way. Like you do. You can absolutely look for hair samples, and the like, right? Because there's
yeah,
obviously these are things that people have seen and heard and have made bent the trees, and pushed grass aside, etc. For sure. But just not to say that there's not an element of them where they can also disperse. You know what I mean? Into something else.
yeah, yeah. No, for sure. And like Legend of Skinwalker Ranch and stuff, I think deals with a little bit of that. Bigfoot coming from other dimensions and stuff,
Yeah.
interdimensional creatures, and there are some wild theories out there. but obviously the scientist, the fact finding part of me that loves intellectualism and loves research and loves exploration is the part of me that's like, oh, when I read that Wahila could be an amphion, I'm like, oh my God, that would be amazing. To see a coelacanth fish, like a living fossil fish alive in our oceans. And then to think, hey, there might be one of those living in my backyard, right?
Oh, for sure.
Responsible for all these incredible tales. Like seeing a wolf bear the size of a small pony out in the woods would be amazing. And being the person to capture that, you know. But I guess we kind of got a little off topic there.
It's
Talking
hard
about
not to though.
wanting to go, go hunt these when we're talking about people afraid of them. But
Yeah, well, because but there's a difference. Like, so people like you and I who are open to these kinds of things, we're excited and fascinated by it. But there's a whole lot of people that if they come face to face with it, that's a frightening thing. Because for one,
oh yeah,
it's unidentified, so their whole worldview shatters. Like people who've had Bigfoot encounters or who believe they've seen an Ogopogo, that changes their whole view of the world.
oh for sure.
Completely, right? Your whole paradigm shifts right there. And that's frightening because most of us like it, everything fitting into nice boxes that make sense, and they like their day to, this because it gives you a semblance of control over your life.
Yeah.
When we really have none, anyways. But it creates that, I believe in X, Y, and Z, and when W comes in and messes with that, my whole world just falls apart.
Yeah. And maybe some of us need that awakening. I think that for me, that's part of my big motivation is all of my research, all of my interest in intellectualism is a developmental autodidactic, teach myself, collect skills, build experience, level up.
Exactly. Become a level 20 paladin.
That's right. Yeah. Lore wizard. I'm like a lore in D&D. I'd be a lore bard 100%. I just collect knowledge. But yeah, like getting into the cryptid stuff and all that has been an absolutely fascinating journey. And I can't thank you enough for putting me down this path because it's just been awesome. I've collected some fantastic books, including your own.
Thank you.
So it's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting to keep seeing where it goes from here. But in terms of like fear too, one thing I want to say is somebody told me a long time ago that bravery and courage isn't the absence of fear. You know, people who say that they're not afraid of anything are full of shit.
Yes.
They're just, I'm sorry to say it that way, but they're full of shit. Nobody is not afraid of anything. And if you are legitimately not afraid of anything, you have a clinical condition.
Yeah, you do. There's something really
Yeah.
wrong with you because there are things you should very much be afraid of in this world.
100%. So, in my opinion, courage and bravery are feeling that fear and facing it anyway. You
Yeah.
know, and when we talk about phobia, this severe and irrational fear, people unable to do these things at all, like I almost feel a little bit of pity and a little bit of sadness because if you're completely unable to see that world outside of your control and I kind of, well, for me, I would be really upset. That would kind of suck for me.
There's a lot of people who are scared like that, though. You know what I mean? Like, and it's a whole other topic of conversation. Yeah, I feel bad for that too. I mean, I'm someone who had a boatload of phobias growing up and anxieties, and I've sort of worked to overcome each and every one. It doesn't mean I still don't get, prime example the other day, it's a bit off topic, but we had to go to Vernon to do a case, and the weather sucked. Like it was, remember we
Mm,
drove from Enderby, it was like that, but you had to go. So, and I've had nearly been killed in a vehicle accident in the middle of winter, but we
hmm.
had to go, so I drove, and you just do it. And each time you do it, it gets easier. It doesn't mean you're not scared going out on the road, you don't get anxious, but you just do it despite that feeling. So yeah, because this whole show's about these fears, I guess if we're to give advice, because we're just past the midpoint of our first run of episodes, is try it. I mean, if you're afraid of ghosts, I don't know, try to find a place that's supposed to be haunted and go hang out there for a bit. If you're scared of the
Yeah.
dark, just turn the lights off in your house at night and sit in the dark for as long as you can.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, right. It's the number one recommended therapy for people with phobic conditions is exposure therapy.
yeah,
So I mean, when we talk about the cryptids and all these creatures and myths and folklore out in the woods, the chances that you're going to run across something if you go camping with some friends are pretty low. But you know, I still think they're there. I wouldn't say they're zero. Nothing's ever zero.
No, no, and I mean, if you're afraid of going to the woods for that reason, you're missing out on just a really great experience anyway, and one that's psychologically been proven to be beneficial to us
Yeah,
as people is time in nature.
yeah,
I think then if you happen to have a Bigfoot encounter, that's just to me icing on the cake. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Right.
Like
Well,
very
that's just
rare is
it. I
it a
mean,
horrible experience. So, you
you,
know?
you might find that what you thought you were afraid of is actually something that you love.
Yeah,
And it's human nature to want to scare ourselves anyways. Hell, like the horror and the thriller and those industries genres wouldn't be as popular as they were if people didn't like getting the pants scared off them.
exactly, exactly. So, which is a great segue, I guess, to let people know part two is coming next week, and we're
That's
talking
right.
cryptids in popular culture, which should
That's
be
going to be
fun.
a fun one. Yeah, that's going to be a fun one. A lot of
So, I guess,
Bigfoot movies.
oh, there's Bigfoot movies. There's not a lot of like lake monster movies. There's a few, but there's
Like
some out there.
Placid comes to mind right off the top of the
Yeah.
head.
I guess the Water Horse, which is more of a kiddie film. But anyways, we'll get into that next week.
Yep.
Anything we want to leave people with, Kenton?
Yeah. Do you do your research? Like get online, go online, ask some friend, go to your local library, ask for cryptid books in your area. It's almost a guarantee that every biome, every place that everybody anywhere lives is going to have this kind of folklore. Ask your elders, ask aunts and uncles, hey, do we have any cool local legends? And maybe they'll mess with you like my First Nations friends did when I was a kid and tell you some bullshit about something like a kabuki moose. But um, yeah, I just dropped that. My best friend Nick out there is going to be laughing. Can't believe you said that, but
Kabuki
but
Moose.
the kabuki moose, yeah, giant moose with straight horns that pins you to trees and eats you. That's what they told us while we were camping this past. Messing with the whiteys, that's what they used to call it. But
Right.
yeah, like check out your local folklore. You're gonna find interesting things, guaranteed.
Awesome. Well, Kenton, thanks for doing all that research, brother. That's fantastic as always. Um, and we're back next week talking about cryptids in folklore. Until then, I'm Jason Hewlett.
And I'm Kenton J. Moore.
Go for a hike in the woods, people.